Taylor epitomized primal vitality. Nevertheless, privately, he was a man who faltered often, plagued by childhood traumas, ensnared by addiction, burdened by the solitude of the artist's existence, and constrained by the relentless demands of being a performance entity that could not cease. His abrupt demise on the evening of March 25, 2022, in Colombia, barely 1 hour prior to the performance, not only incapacitated the band but also created an immense emptiness in the hearts of fans globally. To see why Taylor Hawkins was not merely a talented drummer but a representation of an entire rock generation, we must examine the trajectory of his life. A solo characterized by fluctuations, occasionally unconventional, yet consistently infused with fervor, and one that continues to resonate in the recollections of his admirers. Taylor Hawkins was born on February 17, 1972, in Fort Worth, Texas, as the youngest of 3 siblings. His family subsequently relocated to Laguna Beach, California, when Taylor was merely 5 years old, a picturesque seaside area, yet one rife with unseen forces. His father epitomized the archetype of the 1970s male, reserved, resilient, and emotionally detached. Conversely, his mother, perpetually affectionate and tender, harbored her own unspoken struggles that every child in the household had to adapt to. Taylor once stated, "My mother possessed a darker aspect. When she collapsed on the sofa from fatigue, it was my sister Heather who prepared dinner and managed all responsibilities." In Taylor's recollection, his mother was the sole individual who genuinely believed in his musical aptitude. He stood in the living room, singing, dancing, and feigning a performance. She was the only audience member who applauded with patience. She was the inaugural observer of his fascination with drums and the first to have faith in his potential for success. Conversely, his father shown minimal interest. Taylor once said that his father never truly recognized his talents or hobbies, not out of malice, but rather due to the demands of work and the emotional restraint characteristic of a generation unaccustomed to expressing affection. The emotional void compelled Taylor to seek refuge in music. He once characterized himself as an overweight, unintelligent child who was unsuccessful in all endeavors. Academically challenged, athletically unskilled, and socially unpopular. Everything transformed when a neighbor led him to strike an antiquated drum kit. Taylor was immediately captivated, and the neighbor motivated him. "You were destined to play the drums." Shortly thereafter, a female acquaintance of his had an elder sibling who enlisted in the military, leaving behind a collection of rock recordings. Amidst the dusty, corner-worn album jackets, Taylor unearthed News of the World by Queen, and his perspective transformed. He immersed himself in Roger Taylor's drumming and was captivated by the soundtracks of Star Wars, Superman, and the grand compositions of John Williams. Grand, theatrical, and emotionally nuanced sounds that he claimed to experience with his heart, rather than only perceive with his ears. During high school, Taylor inhabited 2 concurrent realms. Surfing during the day, performing music at night in various cover bands, and practicing drums by playing along to recordings by Rush, Genesis, and The Police. During the era when glam metal prevailed on the charts, Taylor was drawn to alternative rock, particularly Jane's Addiction, whose authentic, unrefined, and defiant sound instilled in him a sense of belonging. No one could have anticipated that this insecure child, who struggled with practically all endeavors, would discover his voice through a set of drumsticks. Few recognized that it was this subdued, intricate upbringing that transformed him into an artist who radiated passion on stage, yet retained profound sensitivity in the absence of illumination. Following his high school graduation, Taylor Hawkins departed Laguna Beach and relocated to Venice, where he engaged deeply with the raw street music culture. A realm in which emerging artists pursued liberation through music rather than notoriety. He and his buddies established a band named Sylvia, a modest ensemble evidently influenced by Jane's Addiction, characterized by its rawness and lack of refinement, yet teeming with ambition and instinct. One evening, Sylvia showcased her talents at Club Lingerie, a modest establishment in Los Angeles. A man named Stevie Salas was present in the thin crowd, seeking a drummer for Canadian vocalist Sass Jordan, who was poised to serve as the opening act for Aerosmith's European tour. Salas was not captivated by the band collectively, but rather by the visual of a long-haired drummer exhibiting exuberant energy and an unmistakable charisma. Following the performance, he remarked, "I require an individual who comprehends punk and alternative music, and that young person possesses an unusual quality." At the age of 22, Taylor Hawkins commenced his inaugural tour with Sass Jordan and quickly distinguished himself on stage. His skills remained unrefined, although he emanated what Jordan characterized as an inner light and love. She remembered the instant he entered the room. Certain individuals captivate you like to light coursing down your spine. Taylor was among them. During an opening performance for Steve Perry, the iconic lead vocalist of Journey, Taylor attracted the interest of Scott Welch, Perry's manager, who was also associated with the emerging artist Alanis Morissette. At that time, Alanis had recently finalized her seminal record, Jagged Little Pill, and was seeking a drummer for her international tour. Taylor was promptly called to audition and subsequently became a vital member of Alanis' live band, alongside guitarist Chris Chaney. The subsequent 2-year period was marked by an exhilarating experience, performing on some of the most prominent stages around. Taylor Hawkins, with his captivating appearance, tousled blonde hair, and theatrical drumming, was as prominent as the main vocalist. He was not merely a drummer, he was integral to the essence of the passionate performances of You Oughta Know, Hand in My Pocket, and Ironic. When inquired about his decision to perform alongside a solo artist, Taylor remarked that it constituted a genuine band rather than only her performance. Alanis allowed me to express my true self. I engaged in music with complete immersion. In 1995, at KROQ's almost acoustic Christmas performance, Taylor encountered Dave Grohl for the first time. Foo Fighters and Alanis were both included in the lineup that day. Taylor subsequently remarked, "I was merely the backup drummer and Dave was the individual I revered in Nirvana. However, he was exceedingly amiable. We engaged in smoking, discussed Queen and the Police, and I instinctively recognized that I had encountered a somebody destined to transform my life. At that moment, it was unforeseeable. That moment signified the inception of one of the most profound friendships in rock history and the commencement of a new chapter, wherein Taylor would no longer remain in another's shadow but emerge as the official drummer of Foo Fighters." However, like with all aspects of Taylor Hawkins' life, the path forward would be far from seamless. Professional advancement. In 1997, when Dave Grohl contacted Taylor Hawkins to inquire about potential drummers for Foo Fighters following William Goldsmith's exit, Taylor promptly responded affirmatively. "Affirmative," he responded, succinctly, resolutely, and with fervor. At that time, Foo Fighters were an emerging band, but Alanis Morissette had already achieved global success, yet Taylor opted for rock not for financial gain, but for the music that invigorated him. His inaugural performance with Foo Fighters occurred on April 19, 1997, during a clandestine event held at the Alligator Lounge in Santa Monica. He commenced a trip with the band through each phase of their progress, from media skepticism to exhilarating stadium performances. Taylor's inaugural album as the official drummer was There Is Nothing Left to Lose, released in 1999. Despite contributing to only a portion of the record, he acknowledged experiencing anxiety in the studio, afflicted with red light fever. The apprehension that arises as the studio recording light illuminates. This marked the inception of a potent dynamic with Grohl. Dave, formerly the drummer for Nirvana, understood precisely what he needed from one. Taylor, who had revered Grohl since adolescence, infused the band with renewed vitality. By the early 2000s, Foo Fighters were achieving prominence. The 2002 album One by One, featuring singles such as All My Life and Times Like These, signified a resurgence following a near dissolution and tumultuous recording sessions. Taylor engaged in activities beyond merely playing the drums. He co-authored, orchestrated, and contributed to the establishment of a sound that was both exacting and untamed, merging the might of arena rock with steadfast sincerity. Subsequent years saw Foo Fighters ascend to prominence as one of the preeminent rock bands globally. They accumulated Grammy Awards, sold tens of millions of CDs, and performed on iconic stages. Wembley, Glastonbury, Lollapalooza, Rock in Rio, and Taylor Hawkins, characterized by his golden hair, dynamic drumming, and compelling stage persona, were integral to that success. Taylor's achievements transcended the Foo Fighters. He commenced composing his own songs, playing guitar, singing lead vocals, and established Taylor Hawkins and the Coattail Riders in 2006. A band that allowed him to explore a different facet of his identity, hilarious, innovative, and limitless. Albums such as Red Light Fever and Get the Money demonstrated that he was not merely an exceptional drummer, but a comprehensive musician. He also participated in many side groups, including Birds of Satan, NHC, featuring members of Jane's Addiction, and the cover band Chevy Metal. He became a regular collaborator with icons such as Elton John, Slash, Brian May, and Coheed and Cambria. Taylor Hawkins was present whenever drums required a distinctive character. Taylor was, above all, the essence of the stage. He did not merely engage in play. He performed, narrated tales, and occasionally exchanged places with Dave Grohl to assume lead vocals. His performances of Under Pressure by Queen, Somebody to Love, and Rock and Roll by Led Zeppelin frequently constituted the highlights of each evening. Over nearly 25 years with Foo Fighters, Taylor contributed to every major album, from In Your Honor to Concrete and Gold, culminating in Medicine at Midnight in 2021, which he characterized as peculiar, experimental, yet exhilarating. Despite achieving global acclaim as one of the most distinguished drummers, Taylor Hawkins retained the essence of a garage band ethos. Unrestrained, unbridled, perpetually innovating. For him, drumming was not a profession. It was the sole means to authentically express himself. His vibrant and passionate existence rendered each performance, every note, and every laugh an irreplaceable component of a musical heritage. He was not merely the percussionist who maintained the band's tempo. He sustained the fervor of admirers for nearly 3 decades. Taylor Hawkins famously quipped that if he were not the drummer for Foo Fighters, he would likely be delivering pizzas. The seemingly facetious comment was not just modesty, it unveiled a truth. He never perceived himself as an untouchable rock star. Taylor consistently had the sentiment of pursuing something: fame, enthusiasm, or perhaps only the experience of freedom. Due to his incessant jogging, there were instances when he exceeded his own boundaries. In the late 1990s, as Foo Fighters ascended, the band's touring itinerary became unyielding. Continuous tours involve airlines, hotels, stages, noise, and the strain to maintain rock intensity consistently each night. Dave Grohl, having experienced the scrutiny and sorrow associated with Nirvana, was accustomed to it. However, for Taylor, who had recently switched from being Alanis Morissette's backup drummer to a full-time member of an ascending global band, this tempo was a jolt to the system. In 2001, following a night of revelry in the UK, just after a performance at the V Festival, Taylor ingested an excessively potent quantity of heroin. The precise circumstances remain unknown; nonetheless, by the subsequent morning, he was unconscious. Medical professionals verified that he was in a profound coma. For those near him, the recollection endures like a haunting nightmare. Dave Grohl, a friend, bandmate, and leader, sat beside his hospital bed, awaiting developments. Momentarily, it seemed as though history was repeated itself. He had previously lost Kurt Cobain. It appeared he could lose yet another brother. However, Taylor awakened and, for the first time, commenced confronting his true self. He did not instantaneously transform into a reformed individual. He subsequently said, "I relished using drugs, but I lost control. I subscribed to the adage, live fast, die young, and I nearly realized it." Recovery progressed gradually, incrementally. He ceased smoking, commenced exercising, and developed an obsession with mountain biking, a new form of addiction that, while healthier, yet underscores his persistent need to fill a gap. He became increasingly cognizant of his health, devoted more time to his family, and endeavored to lead a more balanced life. However, for an artist perpetually attuned to rhythm, excessive silence may provoke unrest. In his 40s, Taylor started to concern himself with physical limitations. He admitted to experiencing stage anxiety, not because of the illumination, but because of his own physicality. He informed Rolling Stone that he is no longer 25. "Each time I perform on stage, I must compete with individuals 2 decades my junior. It resembles combating my own age." Beginning in 2018, observers noted alterations in his behavior. His veteran drum technician, referred to as Yeti, reminisced of a time when Taylor experienced substantial weight loss, insomnia, and appeared utterly fatigued. He consumed food sporadically, engaged in minimal physical activity, and consistently appeared apprehensive. Although he never voiced his grievances openly, the alterations manifested in nuanced ways. Hollow eyes, a languid voice, and occasionally, a pause in the laughter. By late 2021, Foo Fighters resumed touring after COVID-19 with a full itinerary. One night aboard an aircraft, Taylor lost consciousness and required resuscitation with intravenous fluids. He was absent from the Abu Dhabi performance, and as per Chad Smith, drummer of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, that was the time Taylor had to face the ultimate limitation: his well-being. Subsequently, as reported by close associates, Taylor engaged in a confidential discussion with Dave Grohl and the band's management, advocating for a reduced tour itinerary. He stated that he can no longer maintain this pace. "We must devise a solution." However, Foo Fighters camp rejected any official request. All individuals either remained mute or asserted that it was merely a personal perspective, not an official inquiry. What is significant is that, despite the exhaustion, Taylor persistently endeavored. In early 2022, he excitedly told Yeti, "I've hired a trainer, I'm working hard, I've gained 15 pounds, I'm finally doing it right." Those closest to him believed Taylor truly wanted to get back on track, to stay healthy, to restore balance. But sometimes, recovery arrives slower than the body allows, and Taylor Hawkins, though he had walked through the darkness, still carried scars not visible to the eye but never erased. Even amid the thunder of his drums. He was an artist who lived with heartbreaking honesty. And like so many in that world, the price of truth is often the hardest to predict. Personal life: Taylor Hawkins was never the kind of artist who put his private life on display. He wasn't caught in romantic scandals, didn't cross over into media circuits, and rarely shared personal stories on talk shows. But to those who knew him well, Taylor was a deeply affectionate man, fiercely loyal to his family, and someone who lived with a simplicity that seemed almost surprising given the spotlight he had stepped into. In 2005, during a peak in his career with Foo Fighters, Taylor married Allison, the woman who stood by his side for more than 17 years. They weren't a red carpet couple, but in every chapter of his journey, from the stage to behind the scenes, Allison was there. Together, they had 3 children, including their daughter Annabelle, who directly inspired the song "Middle Child," featured on Taylor's solo album, Get the Money. In it, he explored some of the most intimate facets of being a suburban dad. Get the Money wasn't just a fun side project. It was a brief but heartfelt declaration. Taylor wasn't only the drummer in a legendary rock band. He was a man who drove his kids to school, spent evenings playing guitar in the garage, and occasionally drummed with friends' cover bands at local events. He once said, "I know I'll never be a Freddie Mercury or a Dave Grohl, but I can be a good dad, a funny husband, and a nice neighbor. That's enough for me." When not on tour, Taylor lived in Topanga Canyon, a quiet, wooded area in California where the air smelled of pine and the hills rolled endlessly. There, he built a small home studio, working independently, jamming with friends, writing, recording, sometimes just for fun. Neighbors described him as cheerful, often seen biking in the mornings, greeting everyone, never acting like a rock star. Yet, as a sensitive artist, Taylor carried his share of insecurities. In one rare interview, he confessed to feeling overwhelmed by his role. "But a lot of times I just want to go home, sit with my daughter and watch cartoons." Taylor loved his wife, his kids, and his fans. In his subtle manner, he was renowned for consistently signing autographs, never declining a photograph, and, most significantly, never undervaluing the affection of his fans. A notable anecdote before his demise included a 9-year-old girl called Emma Sophia, who set up her toy drum equipment outside his hotel to perform for her idol. Taylor not only descended to capture a photograph, but also engaged in conversation with her, offered encouragement, and displayed what many characterized as the most affable smile of the day. Emma's parents remembered that it was intended to be her worst day, yet Taylor transformed it into her finest. He need neither grand platforms nor ostentatious accolades to be commemorated. Taylor Hawkins made an impact not solely because to his exceptional drumming, but also because he engaged with others as though music were tangible, uncomplicated, and capable of resonating emotionally, offering a kind word, a supportive gesture, or a midnight embrace for his daughter. He required no award to demonstrate his merit as a father, for people who act with sincerity need no validation. Final years. Upon entering his 50s, Taylor Hawkins was no longer the impassioned youth racing across the stage, hair fluttering in the breeze. He continued to exude an extraordinary vitality, prompting crowds to stand in unison the instant his drumming commenced. However, internally, his body and mind had began transmitting distress signals. Following the COVID-19 epidemic, as Foo Fighters re-emerged with the album Medicine at Midnight and the horror comedy film Studio 666, Taylor experienced heightened internal strife. On one hand, he desired to persist. Music constituted his existence. Nonetheless, the unyielding schedule was exhausting him both physically and mentally. He confessed to experiencing stage fear, no longer possessing the confidence he formerly had. I am no longer the 25-year-old individual. Each performance resembles a competition in which I am merely striving to endure. In late 2021, while a flight to Abu Dhabi, Taylor lost consciousness and required resuscitation with intravenous fluids. The performance was annulled. The incident appeared to serve as a cautionary signal. Chad Smith, drummer for the Red Hot Chili Peppers, stated that Taylor engaged in a serious discussion with Dave Grohl and the band's management, openly expressing, "I can't keep doing this. We must implement modifications." Upon entering his 50s, Taylor Hawkins was no longer the exuberant youth racing across the stage, hair billowing in the breeze. He continued to emanate an extraordinary vitality. Still compelled audiences to stand the instant his drumming commenced. However, internally, his body and mind had begun emitting distress signals. Following the COVID-19 epidemic, when the Foo Fighters released the album Medicine at Midnight and the horror comedy film Studio 666, Taylor experienced heightened internal strife. On one hand, he desired to persist. Music constituted the essence of his existence. Conversely, the unyielding routine was exhausting him, both physically and mentally. He confessed to experiencing stage fear, no longer possessing the confidence he formerly had. I am no longer the 25-year-old individual. Each performance resembles a competition. I am merely attempting to endure. In late 2021, while a flight to Abu Dhabi, Taylor lost consciousness and required resuscitation with intravenous fluids. The program was terminated. The incident appeared to serve as a cautionary signal. Chad Smith, the drummer for Red Hot Chili Peppers, reported that Taylor engaged in a serious discussion with Dave Grohl and the band's management, explicitly stating, "I can't keep doing this. Adjustments are necessary." An ambulance arrived around 7:40 p.m. Paramedics administered CPR, however, Taylor Hawkins was already deceased. Ceased the pounding, the playful grin, and the glimmering gaze beneath the lengthy blonde tresses. He perished instantly at the age of 50. The band disclosed the distressing news at 9:59 p.m. That same night, within minutes after thousands of fans discovered the show would be cancelled. The stage became silent. The music ceased. Only candles and tears persisted. Public response and unresolved inquiries. The announcement of Taylor Hawkins' abrupt demise on the evening of March 25, 2022, not only shocked the rock community but also elicited profound sorrow globally. At the Estéreo Picnic Festival stage in Bogotá, where Foo Fighters were scheduled to perform, many remained gathered in expectation. They were oblivious to the fact that the band's passionate drummer had passed away about an hour before to the commencement of the stage lights. Rather of the resounding drumbeat that initiates Everlong, the night was permeated by murmurs, succeeded by muffled sobbing. The stage had ceased to function as a venue for performances. It transformed into a memorial, as hundreds of candles were illuminated for a spirit that had departed from the game he cherished beyond all else. Foo Fighters promptly annulled the remaining performances of their South American tour. In a succinct yet poignant statement, they expressed, "The Foo Fighters family is profoundly saddened by the abrupt and untimely demise of our cherished brother Taylor Hawkins. His joy and melodic essence will endure with us eternally." The message disseminated rapidly, and prominent artists rendered their homage in various manners. Ozzy Osbourne described Taylor as a remarkable individual and an amazing musician. Travis Barker, overwhelmed with emotion, stated, "I am uncertain of what to articulate. Merely expressing that I miss him is insufficient. Until we meet again. We will discuss drums and smoke in the dressing room." Billie Eilish at the Grammy Awards 1 week later. Donned a blouse featuring Taylor's visage during her performance. Miley Cyrus, who replaced Foo Fighters at Lollapalooza Brazil, dedicated her entire performance to Taylor, becoming emotional and weeping on stage. Roger Taylor of Queen, who is Taylor's inspiration, uploaded a photo with his son Rufus, Taylor's esteemed pupil, accompanied by an emotional farewell. Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin shared a performance photograph with Taylor, reminiscing about the energetic skill and luminous innocence he observed in his younger companion. However, the surge of sorrow rapidly transitioned into an alternative sentiment. Inquiries. Taylor Hawkins frequently encountered near-miss situations. In 2001, he experienced a 2-week coma resulting from a cocaine overdose in London, after which he committed to a healthy lifestyle, engaging in strenuous training and receiving frequent health examinations. Merely months prior to his demise, he assured Rolling Stone, "I have just undergone a comprehensive medical examination. The physician stated that I am in excellent condition. My heart is enlarged due to my training as an endurance athlete." What transpired, precisely? A forensic study from Colombia disclosed concerning results. Taylor's heart weighed 600 grams, over double the typical size. A urinalysis revealed the presence of over 10 substances in his system, including opiates, tricyclic antidepressants, benzodiazepines, THC, among others. Certain reports indicated the presence of a cocaine-like drug in the room. However, this detail was subsequently excluded from the prosecutor's formal statement. The ambiguity exacerbated the discomfort. In May 2022, Rolling Stone released an investigative article as fans coped with the loss. Close associates such as Matt Cameron of Pearl Jam and Chad Smith of Red Hot Chili Peppers disclosed that Taylor had communicated his inability to manage the Foo Fighters' demanding tour schedule, requested management to alleviate it, and expressed feelings of impending breakdown. The article states that Taylor expressed, "I can't endure it any longer. This timetable is overwhelming." However, days later, both Cameron and Smith retracted their statements, asserting that their remarks were misinterpreted. Concurrently, the band's representatives maintained silence, exacerbating further ambiguity. Supporters grew polarized. Some perceived it as a terrible accident involving a former drug user whose physique had deteriorated due to years of intense performances. Others contended that Taylor had attempted to voice her concerns but was disregarded amongst the dazzling tumult of the entertainment world. A farewell voicemail subsequently emerged, recorded by Taylor for his close friends, the Farrells, delivering a poignant blow to the hearts of those bereaved. "Look after one another, understood? I will attend to my own well-being. I will see you in Sao Paulo. I love you guys." It wasn't a goodbye. It was a promise. A promise he couldn't keep. Taylor Hawkins' death remains without clear answers. No one can say for certain what happened. All we know is that a man who once beamed behind his drum kit, who bent down to sign an autograph for a 9-year-old girl in Paraguay, who dedicated an entire album to his daughter, quietly fell just before showtime. Perhaps he was simply exhausted. Perhaps he was still trying. And perhaps in his final moments he still believed the show would go on. And that perhaps is the true tragedy. Legacy and impact. Taylor Hawkins was never the kind of person who sought titles. He never demanded the spotlight, nor did he need grand praise to validate his place. Yet when people speak of the greatest drummers of the modern era, names like John Bonham, Neil Peart, or Roger Taylor, Taylor Hawkins often appears quietly among them. Not because of superhuman technique, but because of the wild, sincere spirit he poured into every strike of the drumstick. Taylor wasn't just the timekeeper for Foo Fighters. He was the band's second heartbeat. If Dave Grohl was the brain and soul, then Taylor was the lifeblood. The one who brought energy, fire, and vitality to every performance. He didn't just play drums, he lived inside them. Each beat was a piece of himself, a piece of his heart, and a part of that bright, messy smile that always peeked out from behind his wild blonde hair. His technique was a fusion of classic rock fire and grunge freedom, polished yet instinctive. He could make stadiums quake with The Pretender or All My Life, and just as easily step back, holding a steady groove for Grohl to take the lead. The ultimate bandmate. Beyond drumming, Taylor was also the front man of his own band, Taylor Hawkins and the Coattail Riders, where he showcased his songwriting, vocals, and stage presence on his own terms. The album Get the Money, 2019, was a clear reflection of that. Playful, introspective, filled with love for his family, and laced with the rebellious spirit of someone determined to live on his own terms. He also performed with Alanis Morissette and appeared as a guest on projects by Slash, Brian May and Elton John, a trusted collaborator in the global rock scene. Taylor was a bridge between generations of artists. He revered legends like Roger Taylor and Jimmy Page and became a role model to younger stars like Billie Eilish, Miley Cyrus, and countless young drummers who once stood in awe watching him perform. After his passing, many didn't just remember him as a musician, but as a mentor, a friend to all, always willing to talk, share, and encourage. But perhaps the greatest legacy Taylor Hawkins left behind wasn't found in charts or records. It was in how he inspired others to live fully and authentically. He was once the fat, dumb kid nobody liked who believed he would never amount to anything. Until he picked up a pair of drumsticks and found what made him come alive. He lived fast, lived honestly, loved his kids so deeply he wrote an album for them, hugged young fans like family, and stepped outside just to take photos with a few people drumming on the sidewalk. Taylor didn't build monuments, but he left real footprints in the hearts of those who heard him play, saw his smile on stage, and mourned when he was suddenly gone. And like a drum solo, brief, maybe cut short, but played with every ounce of soul, it stays in the listener's heart forever. That's the kind of legacy Taylor Hawkins created. Taylor Hawkins didn't fade away like a star losing its light. He departed like the final thunderous strike in a rock song that ended too soon. He once said, "I don't want to preach about not doing drugs because I loved them, but I lost control and it almost killed me." It was a confession without filters, without polish, a rare kind of courage, especially in a world where fame often demands a clean image. Taylor lived truthfully. He loved music like a child, loved his family like a devoted father, loved his fans like old friends reunited. And he left this world the same way he lived, without warning, without spectacle, but leaving behind a void no one could ever fill. Over 2 decades with Foo Fighters, deeply personal solo albums, explosive drum solos, tender voice messages to friends, all of it has now become memory. But not a sad memory. Rather, a reminder that some people don't need a full century to be remembered forever. If you've ever found yourself drumming along unconsciously to a Foo Fighters track, laughed watching Taylor hug his drum kit like a kid hugging a teddy bear, or felt a lump in your throat seeing his eyes during those final days, then maybe, in some way, you understand why Taylor Hawkins wasn't just a drummer. He was the heartbeat of an entire era. Share your favorite musical memory of Taylor Hawkins in the comments. And if you believe artists like him deserve to be remembered forever, like, subscribe, and ring the bell to keep these stories alive.